Hello there and welcome back to the Sleep Science. Tonight you find yourself skimming just above the surface of Mercury, the tiniest of the planets, though it hardly feels small when the horizon curves away in a sharp metallic glow. Imagine standing here with one foot in unbearable sunlight and the other in endless night. The ground beneath you could fry a steak at noon, then freeze it solid by midnight. Mercury doesn't have much of an atmosphere, which means it can't soften the contrast between day and night. It's either scorched desert or polar winter, depending on where you stand. And yet the planet hangs on, stubborn as a lump of iron, orbiting the sun at breakneck speed like it's trying to keep some cosmic appointment. You probably won't survive this, just to be clear. Your spacesuit is sweating harder than you are, and your oxygen tanks don't love the idea of swinging from plus 430 degrees Celsius to 180. But let's not dwell on survival. This is a sleepy journey, not a survival guide. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is right now in your corner of the cosmos. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You drift over Mercury's grey plains, which look less like landscapes and more like a scarred metal plate left out in the rain for 4 billion years. Craters overlap like coffee stains on a badly used desk. Some of those scars have names, Ceres Basin for instance, a giant impact site stretching more than 1,500 kilometers across. That's bigger than the entire state of Texas, though admittedly Texas has fewer molten lava lakes. The Ceres impact was so violent that shockwaves rippled through the whole planet, wrinkling the terrain on the opposite side. Imagine being punched so hard in the face that your back wrinkled. That's Mercury. The quirky tidbit here is that Mercury might still be shrinking. Scientists think the core is cooling and the crust is crumpling like a raisin. So somewhere out there are lobate scarps, cliffs hundreds of kilometers long where the crust shoved itself upward. Historians still argue whether early skywatchers, like Babylonian astronomers, realized Mercury was the same object seen in both morning and evening skies, or if they believed it was two entirely separate stars playing tag with the sun. Floating along, you notice how close Mercury hugs its parent star, just 58 million kilometers away. From here, the sun is twice as wide as you'd ever see from Earth, a blinding disk that dominates the sky. Ancient cultures sometimes feared Mercury's fleeting presence, since it darts in and out of sunlight too quickly for comfortable tracking. The Romans gave it the name of their messenger god, fast, slip-furry, hard to pin down. A pretty fitting moniker for a planet that rushes around the sun in just 88 days. You skim lower, brushing across landscapes with cheerful names like Chaos Terrain. The ground looks like someone dropped a cosmic chandelier and left shards scattered in every direction. NASA's Messenger spacecraft once flew here, mapping craters and sniffing for oddities, and it found one: ice. Yes, despite the infernal sunlight, Mercury's poles hide frozen water in permanently shadowed craters. Think of them as little cosmic iceboxes, forever untouched by dawn. It's a delicious paradox, frost thriving next to fire. If you squint, you can almost imagine early telescopic observers in the 1600s, sweating over blurry sketches of Mercury's disk, trying to convince each other that maybe, just maybe, they saw continents or clouds. Spoiler, they didn't. Even later in the 20th century, textbooks confidently declared that Mercury was tidally locked to the sun, showing only one face forever, like a nervous poker player. It wasn't until 1965 that radar observations revealed the truth. Mercury actually rotates every 59 days, a slow spin, but not frozen. So for every 2 orbits around the sun, Mercury spins 3 times. That's a neat little resonance, almost as if it's keeping time with an invisible metronome. The sleepiness of the scene creeps in as you glide across its horizon. The silence here is absolute. No wind, no rustle, no protective air to carry sound. Just the hum of your own breath inside your helmet, and perhaps the faintest creak of shifting metal as your spacecraft adjusts its orbit. Even light seems sharper here, like the edges of things were cut with a razor. The stark simplicity of Mercury feels both intimidating and oddly calming the way a minimalist room does. Nothing unnecessary, nothing distracting, just raw survival pressed into stone. And yet Mercury is not just a rock, it's a reminder of what might have been. Some scientists suspect it lost a huge portion of its outer layers in a catastrophic collision long ago. Maybe Mercury started life as a bigger planet, but some cosmic bully, probably a protoplanet the size of Mars, sideswiped it, blasting off most of its mantle. What's left is an oversized iron core wrapped in a thin crust, like a peeled fruit that someone dropped on the floor. Historians still argue whether this colossal demolition derby shaped not just Mercury, but the whole architecture of the inner solar system. You drift now toward the horizon, where the shadow line, astronomers call it the Terminator, crawls slowly across the ground. On one side, the baked wasteland glows like molten copper. On the other, darkness swallows everything into silence, punctuated only by the silver glint of starlight. It feels like watching day and night fight over territory, inch by inch, across a quiet world that doesn't care. For a moment, you imagine setting down a chair right at that line, sipping tea, while the sun hovers forever on the edge. Not too hot, not too cold, just perpetually twilight. The perfect vacation spot, assuming your definition of perfect includes being sandblasted by solar radiation and micrometeorites every other hour. But hey, at least you wouldn't need to argue about sunscreen brands. Your eyes lift back toward the blazing sun. From Mercury, solar storms are not abstract weather. They are tidal waves of radiation, sometimes smacking the planet so hard they stir up the magnetic field into luminous magnetic tornadoes. It's an invisible stormscape raging silently in the space around you, while the ground below remains frozen in its eternal hush. And then, as you float further from Mercury, it begins to shrink behind you, returning to its role as the overlooked runt of the planetary lineup. Always there, never quite commanding attention, but carrying stories etched in craters and whispers of ice locked in shadows. The little planet spins on, Beau, quietly marking time for an audience of no one. And you drift toward the next mystery waiting in the cloudy embrace of Venus. You drifted out of the Mercury's glare, letting that tiny iron marble fall behind you, and soon the sky ahead thickens into a pale gold haze. Venus rises like a lantern, swollen and radiant, but it hides more than it reveals. You've probably seen it back on Earth, first as a bright star sparkling just after sunset or before dawn. Poets called it the morning star, the evening star, a heavenly jewel. But as you get closer, the romance evaporates. This planet has the ultimate catfish profile picture, dazzling from a distance, deadly up close. The first thing you notice is the light. Venus reflects more sunlight than any other planet. Its clouds, thick with sulfuric acid, gleam so fiercely that you almost need sunglasses inside your helmet. But beneath that shining cloak is a world of crushing weight. The atmosphere presses with 90 times the force of Earth's air. If you stood here, well, you wouldn't stand for long. The pressure would flatten you flatter than a pancake. And that's before the heat gets involved. The temperature is relentless, about 4 or 5 degrees Celsius everywhere, from equator to pole, day or night. You could fry an egg on a rock, sure, but the egg, the pan, and probably you too would all combust together in a slow, sizzling barbecue. Venus is hot enough to melt lead. The phrase bad vacation spot doesn't quite capture it. You might as well pitch a tent inside an oven set to broil. And yet, Venus wasn't always like this. Historians still argue whether early in its history oceans covered the surface. Some models suggest Venus once had water, clouds, and maybe even rain. If that's true, it might have been Earth's sister in more than just size and mass. Imagine two twins starting life side by side, Earth growing into a garden, Venus spiraling into a greenhouse from hell. Somewhere in those early eons, the atmosphere tipped, water boiled away, and runaway greenhouse gases wrapped the planet in a suffocating blanket it never escaped. A mainstream fact. In 1962, NASA's Mariner 2 became the first successful mission to another planet, flying by Venus and confirming the hellish temperatures scientists had only guessed at before. But the quirky tidbit is this. In the late 1600s, a German astronomer named Andreas Meyer claimed he saw a moon orbiting Venus, which he named Ninth. For over a century, others reported seeing it too. Some insisted Venus had a companion satellite. Spoiler, no moon exists there. Most likely it was a mix of optical illusions and nearby stars masquerading as a companion. Venus kept its solitary throne, though the phantom moon pops up in old records like a ghostly sidekick. Sliding through the cloud tops now, you encounter winds screaming at 350 kilometers an hour. That's faster than a jetliner, and these winds circle the planet in just 4 Earth days. Meanwhile, the solid surface below rotates glacially slow. 1 full day on Venus lasts 243 Earth days, and, for extra drama, it spins backwards. If you lived here, again, bad idea, the sun would rise in the west and set in the east, crawling across the sky at a pace that makes waiting for the weekend feel like instant gratification. The Soviet Union had a particular obsession with Venus, sending a series of probes in the 1960s and 70s. Many burned up, suffocated, or collapsed in the pressure, but a few heroic survivors, Veneran 910 things, managed to send back the first photos of the surface. Those grainy images showed a barren wasteland of rocks, cracked like old asphalt, glowing faintly through a toxic haze. Venera 13 even transmitted sound, a faint rumbling of wind, eerily calm, as if the planet was exhaling through clenched teeth. Historians still argue whether we should consider Venus a cautionary tale for Earth's own climate. Some scientists look at its runaway greenhouse effect and wonder, if our carbon emissions spiral out of control, could Earth someday become a smaller version of Venus? Others argue that the comparison is too dramatic, that Earth has stabilising feedback loops Venus never did. But the debate lingers, like the acidic clouds swirling endlessly overhead. You skim lower and imagine walking here. The ground would glow faintly orange through the haze. Every horizon would be blurred. Above you, lightning might crack through the clouds, though whether Venus truly has lightning is another of those ongoing debates. And if you paused, you might smell sulphur, though your nose wouldn't survive long enough to complain. The sleepiness of the scene creeps in as you drift through those thick golden curtains. Everything is muffled here. The speed of the winds doesn't register. There's no rustle, no flutter of leaves, just a deep hush, as though the whole planet is sealed in a soundproof jar. Even the idea of motion feels slow. Your spacecraft inches downward, but the hazy air makes it seem like you're sinking through honey. And while Venus is a hellscape today, it's also a muse. Painters and writers for centuries used it as shorthand for beauty. It gave its name to goddesses, to morning rituals, to evening lovers' promises. Strange how something so deadly can look so gentle from far away. It's the ultimate cosmic reminder that appearances, as your grandmother probably told you, can be deceiving. One last playful thought. If you could survive, Venus would make an excellent stage for a comedy. Because its day is longer than its year, you'd celebrate a birthday before you ever saw the sun rise again. Imagine turning 40 years old, still waiting for your first sunrise party, but you won't linger here long. The atmosphere closes in like a steaming sauna you can't escape. Your body relaxes into the humming silence, and you rise back upward, slipping through golden clouds toward the stars. Behind you, Venus keeps its secrets, glowing deceptively pretty, a jewel wrapped in acid and fire. Ahead, a red spark waits, pulling your gaze toward rusty deserts and whispers of canals that never were. You leave Venus shimmering behind, like a jewel tossed back into the velvet dark, and the next stretch of space feels strangely empty. Between Venus and Mars lies Earth, your home, though tonight you're only passing by. From orbit, Earth looks like a marble streaked with clouds, endlessly alive, endlessly blue. But your sleepy journey doesn't stop at the familiar view from the porthole. Tonight, you're pulled deeper, past the obvious oceans and forests, into the strange family tree that gave Earth its place among the planets. Because in truth, Earth is not an only child. It might have had siblings, some forgotten, some consumed, some perhaps still haunting the edges of history. One of those siblings has a name, Theia. This hypothetical planet, about the size of Mars, is believed to have slammed into the young Earth roughly 4.5 billion years ago. The collision was so violent that chunks of both bodies splashed into orbit, eventually coalescing into the Moon. It's one of the most popular models for how our satellite was born, but historians still argue whether the evidence lines up perfectly. Some scientists say the Moon should show more Theia's fingerprints in its chemistry, while others argue Earth and Theia's similarities explain why the Moon is nearly a twin in composition. The debate simmers like a family drama. Did Earth's sibling vanish entirely, or does it still exist, mixed into every mountain and ocean we see today? There's something oddly comforting about imagining Earth as the survivor of cosmic sibling rivalry. You can almost picture little protoplanets bumping elbows in a crowded nursery around the sun, fighting for stable orbits. Some merged, some broke apart, and Earth just happened to grow big enough, stable enough, and lucky enough to last. A mainstream historical fact. This idea of cosmic family trees goes back at least to the 18th century, when philosophers like Immanuel Kant and Pierre-Simon Laplace speculated about nebular origins of the solar system. They didn't know about Theia, but they already imagined worlds forming, colliding and rearranging in a cosmic ballet. And then there's the quirky tidbit. Some researchers have floated the idea of a second moon orbiting Earth for brief times in history. Temporary captured asteroids, sometimes called mini-moons, do indeed circle us for months or years before escaping again. In 2006, a small object named 2006 RH20 stuck around for about 9 months before leaving Earth's grasp. Imagine trying to explain that to a Neolithic stargazer. Yes, that tiny speck is our other moon, but don't get too attached. It'll be gone by harvest. Your view of Earth shifts now, tilting toward the Pacific Ocean, where tectonic plates grind slowly beneath the waves. All that movement is part of Earth's uniqueness. No other planet we know has this restless skin. Some scientists even argue plate tectonics are essential for keeping the climate stable over billions of years. Without it, perhaps Earth would have gone the way of Venus, its carbon locked in a choking atmosphere. Others debate whether plate tectonics might eventually grind to a halt, leaving Earth to freeze or bake depending on the balance of gases. Historians still argue whether life itself encouraged this long geologic dance, recycling carbon and oxygen through rock and sea. As you drift closer, you notice the faint lunar pull beside Earth. Our moon, large compared to its parent, almost seems too big for the role. Some astronomers call it a double planet system, because the moon isn't just a tag-along, it sculpts tides, stabilizes Earth's tilt, and maybe even influenced the pace at which life evolved. Without the moon's tug, Earth might wobble wildly, tipping climates into chaos. So perhaps the forgotten sibling Theia lives on not only in the moon, but in the rhythm of every tide and the hush of every night sky you've ever known. From the sleepy vantage of orbit, Earth looks impossibly calm, though you know better. Lightning flickers across the Indian Ocean. Storm systems swirl, perfectly circular from here, like white roses opening in slow motion. Somewhere down there, people are awake, grumbling at alarm clocks or scrolling through their phones in the dark, and here you are, drifting above it all, trying to remember that the planet itself has secrets much older than humanity's restlessness. Let your mind wander a little. Imagine Earth's hidden twins. Some scientists propose a shadow world in Earth's orbit, trailing behind or hiding opposite the Sun, at the so-called Lagrange points. There's no hard evidence, but the thought lingers. What if unseen, another world traces the same yearly path, always invisible because the Sun keeps it perfectly hidden? It would be the ultimate cosmic prank, a secret twin sharing every sunrise but never waving hello. This is where the sleepy cadence wraps around you. Earth spins slowly beneath, and the hum of its magnetic field brushes faintly against your instruments like a cosmic lullaby. You can feel the planet's pull, steady and familiar, the kind of background hum you only notice when it's gone. If Mercury was silence and Venus was suffocation, Earth is a rhythm, tides, seasons, storms, all layered into a song you've been listening to your whole life. And yet part of you remembers the irony. The thing you're floating above is both fragile and violent. Its surface bears scars from impacts, from volcanic floods, from continents ramming together like slow-motion bumper cars. Earth is the survivor of chaos, but also its product. The forgotten planets, those siblings smashed or scattered, live on in this one blue marble, tucked invisibly into every rock and tide. You drift outward again, letting the clouds blur into a soft haze. Behind you, Earth spins on, blissfully unaware of the lost siblings it swallowed. Ahead, a red spark glows faintly. Mars waits, rusty, dusty, and forever famous for canals that turned out to be nothing more than illusions. Mars glimmers faintly ahead, a dusty ember in the night. You glide closer, and the red grows sharper until it fills your view. Stretches of ochre plains, rust-stained cliffs, and volcanoes so tall they pierce the horizon like cosmic skyscrapers. Mars has always been the planet of imagination, the one that caught human eyes and refused to let go. You've probably heard the nickname the Red Planet, but for centuries it was more than just a colour. It was a canvas, and onto it we projected our deepest hopes and fears. You ease down toward the Martian desert, and the silence here feels different from Mercury's or Venus's. On Mercury there was harsh emptiness, on Venus a muffled choke, but Mars has a stillness that feels like an abandoned playground. Dust settling where once, maybe, something moved. The wind brushes faint streaks across dunes, whispering like a broom sweeping through an empty classroom. The mainstream historical fact here is this. In 1807, Italian astronomer Giovanni Schiaparelli peered through his telescope and reported seeing canali on Mars, long linear features crisscrossing the surface. In Italian, canali means channels, but when his work was translated into English, it became canals. Suddenly, the world imagined not natural valleys but artificial waterways, engineered by intelligent Martians struggling to irrigate their dying planet. Newspapers lit up. Authors salivated. Mars, once a dot in the sky, became a frontier teeming with alien architects. A quirky tidbit. Schiaparelli himself never claimed Martians dug canals. He was meticulous, scientific, cautious, but a few decades later, American astronomer Percival Lowell ran with the idea. Lowell built his own observatory in Arizona and spent years sketching elaborate grids of canals. He published maps that looked like interplanetary subway systems. For him, Mars wasn't just alive, it was brilliant, advanced, a society of survivors cleverly rerouting water from the poles to the equator. Never mind that most astronomers couldn't see what he saw, Lowell doubled down. And in a way, he inspired an entire genre of science fiction. Stories of Martian invaders, Martian lovers, Martian cities carved beneath domes of glass. Historians still argue whether Lowell believed his own drawings to the end, or whether he quietly knew he was over-romanticizing fuzzy dots on a lens. Now you drift lower, passing over Valle Marinere, a canyon so vast it makes Earth's Grand Canyon look like a pothole. Imagine a gash stretching 4,000 kilometers across the planet, deeper than Everest is tall, carved by forces still debated today. Did flowing water gouge this scar? Did tectonic stress pull the crust apart? Or is it the result of volcanic uplift tearing the planet like a seam in fabric? The answer isn't settled. Mars remains coy with its history, leaving evidence scattered like puzzle pieces missing half the edges. Olympus Mons rises in the distance, 3 times taller than Everest, a volcano so wide you'd have to drive for 2 days just to reach its far rim. And yet it sleeps, silent, perhaps extinct. Imagine standing at its base. The horizon curves before you, and still the mountain's slope crawls upward, invisible in the distance as if you were climbing the world itself. The surface beneath your drifting feet glows with iron oxide, the rust that gives Mars its colour. And here's another debate. Historians still argue whether liquid water once covered these plains in lakes and oceans. Some satellite images hint at shorelines, but others dismiss them as tricks of light. What is certain is that riverbeds snake across the land, dry now, but etched in patterns that scream of flowing water in ages past. Let your sleepy mind wander into the softer imagery. Picture those canals the Victorians dreamed of, broad waterways glittering under twin moons, Martian farmers guiding crops of shimmering crystal, Martian children skipping over low-gravity playgrounds. The fantasy feels almost cozy, like a bedtime story read too often. And then imagine the disappointment century after century as better telescopes revealed barren dust. The canals blurred away into optical illusions, scratches of light tricking weary eyes. Yet the dream refused to die. Even now, every rover we send is followed by headlines whispering signs of life. NASA's Curiosity found methane puffs, unexplained but tantalizing. Perseverance drills cores, hoping for microfossils, and the debate continues. Is Mars dead or just dormant? Did microbes thrive underground once, shielded from solar radiation, maybe even still hiding in briny pockets today? Historians still argue whether the Viking landers of the 1970s already detected something, their results muddied by experimental noise. The wind kicks faintly as you hover. Mars's atmosphere is thin, barely 1% of Earth's, enough for dust storms, but not for comfort. Sometimes those storms swallow the entire planet, wrapping it in a red haze for weeks. Imagine sipping coffee under a sky turned copper, the sun a faint disk struggling to shine. The stillness here is deceptive. Mars is both calm and capricious, a place where silence can suddenly roar. The quirky humour creeps back as you picture early sci-fi pulp covers, green-skinned Martians waving ray guns, canals sparkling, like Venice. If only Lowell could ride along with you now, peering out at rocks and dust, his dreams dissolving like fog in sunlight. Or maybe he'd smile, proud that he lit the spark of curiosity that still burns every time we send another probe. You drift upward again, leaving behind the illusionary canals, the dusty storms, the towering volcanoes. Mars shrinks to a glowing ember, not a bustling civilization, but not an empty world either, just a planet caught between truth and fantasy. And as the red fades into the black, you sense the pull of something stranger still. A realm of shattered stones, fragments of a world that never quite was. Ahead lies the asteroid belt, an unfinished chapter in the solar system's story. The red spark of Mars dims behind you, and ahead the darkness thickens, not empty, but cluttered. You drift into the asteroid belt, the cosmic junk drawer of the solar system. From Earth, people once imagined this region as a dangerous gauntlet, a Hollywood-style asteroid field where ships would dodge boulders every second. In reality, most of the objects are spread so thin that you could sail through for days and never bump a single rock. Still, the belt holds its own strange beauty, a realm of fragments. Leftovers from the earliest days, the building blocks of a planet that never was. You slow your pace, letting some stones drift around you. They're not all alike. Some asteroids are tiny pebbles, others mountains in space. A few are shaped like potatoes, others like shattered sculptures. The light from the distant sun glints faintly off metallic surfaces, casting cold sparkles into the void. These rocks are old, older than Earth, older than the Moon. Preserved relics from when the solar system was a swirling disk of gas and dust. It's like rummaging through a cosmic attic, except instead of musty boxes, you find billion-year-old iron lumps. A mainstream fact, in 1801, astronomer Giuseppe Piazzi discovered the first and largest asteroid, Ceres. At first, scientists thought they'd found a new planet, fitting neatly between Mars and Jupiter, where the German mathematician Johann Titius had predicted one should exist. Within a few years, more planets appeared. Pallas, Juno, Vesta, and suddenly there were too many, too small. The word asteroid, meaning star-like, was coined to classify them, and Ceres was demoted from planetary glory. Poor Ceres, it's been promoted, demoted, and re-promoted so many times it could put Pluto to shame. Here's your quirky tidbit. In the 9th century, some astronomers seriously believed the asteroids were the broken pieces of a once grand planet that exploded between Mars and Jupiter. They even gave the hypothetical world a name, Phaeton, after the son of Apollo who lost control of the sun's chariot and fell from the sky. The idea of a shattered planet appealed to people's imaginations, but Voism for physics says otherwise. It's more likely that Jupiter's massive gravity kept this region from ever coalescing into a planet in the first place. The rocks never had a chance. They were bullied by the gas giant into eternal fragmentation. Still, you can't quite resist picturing the lost world scattered in slow motion across billions of years. Historians still argue whether some of these asteroids carry enough water and organic compounds to have seeded Earth with the ingredients for life. Carbon-rich fragments, called carbonaceous chondrites, contain amino acids and other precursors of biology. Maybe, just maybe, your DNA has a piece of asteroid heritage tucked inside it. Imagine that. Life on Earth, not homegrown, but delivered by space pebbles flung across the solar system. As you float deeper, you notice one object tumbling by, its surface polished metal. That's Psyche, a massive asteroid thought to be the exposed core of a failed planet. If that's true, you're looking at the insides of a world stripped bare, like peeking at the gears of a watch after the face is smashed. NASA is actually sending a mission there, scheduled to orbit Psyche and study whether it's truly a planetary heart. You drift around it slowly, like circling the fossil of a creature that never lived. The sleepy stillness of the belt wraps around you. Unlike the fierce winds of Venus or the thin whispers of Mars, here there is almost nothing, just gentle motion. You drift past Vesta, a battered worldlet with scars from colossal impacts. One of those collisions blasted so much debris into space that meteorites from Vesta have landed on Earth. Picture holding a piece of rock in your hand, not just from another planet, but from a planet that never quite existed. The light is softer here, the sun reduced to a distant lamp. Shadows stretch long across jagged craters, and everything feels suspended, like you're floating in a dream between what could have been and what never was. The belt feels less like a graveyard and more like a library, shelves of stone, each fragment holding a frozen story of the early solar system. And, because humour always sneaks in, you imagine an interplanetary realtor trying to sell one of these rocks. Great starter planet, needs a little work, missing atmosphere, water optional, orbit negotiable, excellent view of Jupiter, no HOA fees. Historians still argue whether asteroids were truly the failed planet, or if that's just a story we tell ourselves to impose order on chaos. After all, the belt is no more tragic than a field of wildflowers, messy, incomplete, but beautiful. Maybe the failure is ours, insisting on planets where nature offered fragments. You drift slowly onward, weaving through rubble and quiet. Somewhere ahead waits Ceres again, the queen of this broken kingdom, straddling the line between asteroid and planet. She waits with her salty scars and her hidden reservoirs, holding secrets that might stretch back to the origins of oceans themselves. The asteroid belt fades behind you like a half-remembered dream, but not forgotten. These stones keep circling forever, whispering of what never came to be. And as you follow the curve of orbit, you feel yourself drawn towards Ceres, an almost planet, demoted, promoted, and stubbornly holding on to her dignity in the cold. Ceres emerges ahead like a pearl adrift in the rubble, round, pale, and quietly stubborn in its identity. At about 940 kilometers across, it's big enough to be spherical but too small to command respect in a solar system that hands out planet titles like a fickle fashion awards. Once the first asteroid, then a planet, then downgraded, and finally a dwarf planet. Shikazika's played musical chairs with astronomers' definitions for over 2 centuries, and yet here she is, circling the sun faithfully, indifferent to her shifting status. As you drift closer, the surface gleams with scars and shadows. Dawn spacecraft images revealed something unexpected. Bright white spots, glimmering in craters, like diamonds scattered on dusty velvet. At first, scientists whispered about alien beacons, Martian-style canal flashbacks. The truth is less flashy, but no less fascinating. The spots are deposits of salt left behind by subsurface brines that seeped up and evaporated. Imagine a world so cold and dark, and yet somehow it hides salty mud puddles beneath its crust. The mainstream fact: in 2015, NASA's Dawn mission entered orbit around Ceres, making it the first spacecraft to orbit a dwarf planet. Dawn's cameras revealed a Huna Mons, a cryovolcano rising 4 kilometers high, thought to have erupted icy slurries instead of molten lava. It was like catching Ceres mid-yawn after billions of years of seeming stillness. Here's the quirky tidbit. Long before telescopes or spacecraft, the Roman goddess Ceres was worshipped as the guardian of agriculture, grains, and nourishment. Naming this icy dwarf after her feels both ironic and poetic. An object floating in the vacuum, barren and salt-crusted, yet named for fertility and growth. Historians still argue whether Piazzi, who discovered Ceres in 1801, picked the name simply to honour tradition or to nod toward humanity's hunger for cosmic harvests. Either way, it's stuck. You skim lower over a crater, home of the shimmering salt deposits. The surface looks like it's been sprinkled with cosmic powdered sugar. Imagine walking there, every crunch of your boots sinking into dark dust. Every horizon dim, the sun no brighter than a small disk hanging low in the sky. But then your eye would catch the glitter, patches of bright mineral like road signs saying something interesting happened here. Scientists suspect that beneath Ceres' crust lies a reservoir of briny water, maybe dozens of kilometers deep. Could anything live in that underground sea? The conditions aren't ideal, but then again, life has surprised us before. In Earth's deep oceans, in acidic springs, in frozen deserts. Historians still argue whether Ceres could be a candidate for life's hidden cradle, a modest icy world hiding microbial secrets under its brittle skin. The sleepy cadence deepens as you glide past a Huna Mons. Its slope is gentle, like a giant mound of frosting left to harden. Unlike the jagged cliffs of Mars or the shattered rocks of the belt, Ceres feels softer, rounder, as if time has worn her into a smooth pebble. Even her cryovolcano looks less violent than weary, a slow exhalation of icy breath. and the debate about her status lingers like background static. Some astronomers insist Ceres deserves to be called a planet again, given its roundness and geological activity. Others dismiss it as too small, too meek. It's the same argument that swirled around Pluto's demotion, the same human urge to sort, to classify, to box the cosmos into neat drawers. But Ceres herself doesn't flinch. She circles the sun the same way she always has, her title irrelevant in the long sweep of time. Let your mind wander further. Imagine a civilization here, not Martian canal builders, but something subtler. Picture tiny life forms drifting in briny pockets, invisible to the naked eye, patiently enduring as salt plumes rise and fall. A planet forgotten by humans, yet still alive in its own quiet way. You can almost hear the hum of underground water, slow and steady, like the heartbeat of a sleeping creature. You float upward again, letting the dwarfs' curved horizon shrink beneath you. The belt spreads out beyond, its rubble glittering faintly. But ahead, something massive tugs at your path. Jupiter, the gas giant, the tyrant, the shepherd, whose gravity bullied Ceres and her neighbours into fragments. It looms already in your mind, a swollen, storm-filled giant with mysteries at its core. Before you leave, one last wry thought. If the gods of astronomy held reunions, Ceres would be that cousin who keeps getting invited and uninvited, depending on the year. Planet? Not planet? Dwarf? Guest of honour? Whatever the label, she smiles politely and keeps circling. You drift away, Ceres fading like a pearl dropped back into the rubble, while Jupiter's shadow swells, preparing to swallow the sky. Jupiter rises before you, and the word rises hardly does it justice. It doesn't come into view so much as it consumes everything else. The gas giant swells until it fills your vision, banded in streaks of orange, cream and rusty red. Storms churn like brushstrokes smeared across a canvas painted by a restless hand. You've seen pictures before, sure, but up close the sheer scale is unsettling. Earth could vanish into one of those cloud bands without so much as a ripple. Jupiter is the king of planets, monarch so massive that it holds court with dozens of moons, and enough gravity to bully the rest of the solar system. Yet for all its grandeur, it's also mysterious. You glide nearer, watching the great red spot spin like a colossal hurricane, 3 Earths wide, still swirling after centuries. Historians still argue whether early astronomers like Robert Hooke or Giovanni Cassini were the first to spot it in the 1600s, but what matters is that the storm has been raging ever since, an eternal bruise on Jupiter's face. But here's the hook tonight. What about Jupiter's core? For decades, scientists imagined the planet with a neat structure, dense rocky centre, surrounded by metallic hydrogen, cloaked in thick atmosphere. Then in 2017, NASA's Juno spacecraft swooped in and sent back data that rattled expectations. Jupiter's core, it turns out, might not be neat at all. Instead, it could be a fuzzy core, spread out, diluted, a soup of heavy elements mixing with hydrogen. And why? One leading theory suggests Jupiter once swallowed another planet. Picture it. Billions of years ago, a protoplanet perhaps 10 times the size of Earth crashed headlong into young Jupiter. Not a glancing blow, but a direct plunge into its heart. The impact stirred everything up, scrambling what might have been a sharp boundary into the messy gradient Juno now detects, a cosmic crime scene, with Jupiter as both victim and victor. It kept the spoils, the heavy elements, but lost the tidy layering we expected. A mainstream historical fact. Jupiter's name comes from the chief deity of Roman mythology, Zeus's counterpart. Ancient cultures tracked it obsessively. The Babylonians, as early as the 7th century BCE, had records of Jupiter's movements in clay tablets. They saw it not just as a planet, but as a wandering star of immense importance, a marker of omens and royal fates. And here's your quirky tidbit. Some 9th century astronomers believe Jupiter emitted its own light, a kind of mini-sun. The planet is indeed warm from internal heat, but the glowing orb they imagined wasn't quite right. Still, the idea lingered in fiction. Stories of Jupiter as a star in waiting, a failed sun that never quite ignited. It's not entirely wrong. Jupiter is composed mostly of hydrogen and helium, just like the Sun, but it lacks the mass to trigger fusion. You could stack up about 80 Jupiters before nuclear ignition finally sparks. As you drift along its equator, the banded atmosphere rushes below you at hundreds of kilometers per hour. The belts and zones, light and dark stripes, circle the planet like the grooves of a record, though here the record plays storms instead of songs. Sleepiness creeps into your thoughts as you realise how endless it all feels. There is no ground, no shore, just cloud upon cloud, pressure rising the deeper you'd sink, until hydrogen itself becomes metallic, conducting electricity and feeding Jupiter's massive magnetic field. Historians still argue whether this swallowed planet theory is the only explanation for the fuzzy core. Some suggest gradual erosion of the core material instead, dissolved over billions of years into the surrounding hydrogen. Others imagine multiple impacts, not just one cataclysm, reshaping Jupiter bit by bit. The details remain hazy, like the cloud tops swirling beneath you. You glance outward, and the moons steal your attention. Io, Europa, Ganymede, Callisto, each a world in its own right, tugging and pulled by Jupiter's gravity. Together, they form a miniature solar system, but your focus tonight is inward, toward the secrets at the heart of the giant itself. You picture that devoured world now dissolved, its ghost forever part of Jupiter's stormy soul. And for a playful note, imagine if Jupiter did ignite, becoming a second sun. Earth would have twin star rises and sunsets, like a scene from a space opera. Romantic? Maybe. Survivable? Probably not, unless you enjoy firestorms and tectonic chaos. But it makes for a dreamy picture as you hover here, drifting in the glow of what might have been. The sleepy rhythm of Jupiter settles into you. Its storms blur together, its core debate lulls like a half-remembered argument. The planet doesn't care what we call it, gas giant, failed star, planetary cannibal. It spins, massive and untouchable, whispering gravity across billions of kilometers. And as you turn your gaze outward again, you feel the rings of Saturn calling, faint from here but shimmering like a cosmic halo. If Jupiter is the king, Saturn is the dancer, adorned with ornaments carved from ruin. You leave Jupiter behind, its swollen bulk fading, and glide toward a world of rings, where beauty masks a history of shattering loss. Saturn greets you slowly, with elegance rather than brute force. From afar it gleams pale yellow, a muted cousin to Jupiter's bold stripes. But as you draw closer, the reason it has haunted human imagination for centuries unfurls. The rings. They spread across the void like spun glass, impossibly thin yet dazzling, stretching hundreds of thousands of kilometers. Even through a sleepy gaze, they look almost too perfect, like someone painted halos on the night sky. I guess Galileo was the first to see them in 1610, though his telescope blurred the view. He thought Saturn had ears, little lumps sticking out on either side. It wasn't until Christian Huygens, in 1655, that the ring system was properly described. A mainstream historical fact. For centuries afterward, no one knew what the rings were made of. Theories ranged from solid disks to swarms of tiny moons. We now know the truth, trillions of icy particles, ranging in size from grains of dust to house-sized boulders, all dancing in a razor-thin plane. Here's the quirky tidbit. In the 1800s, a few astronomers actually proposed the rings might be solid. If that were true, Saturn would have been the ultimate cosmic record player, a solid platter spinning around the planet. Imagine the soundtrack. Unfortunately for that dream, physics says solid rings would shatter instantly. They're fragile, ephemeral, made of ice that constantly breaks, reforms, and grinds itself to glitter. You drift closer, passing through Cassini division, a broad gap that looks like a black ribbon cutting through the rings. In reality, it's not empty but sculpted by gravity, Saturn's moon. Mimas pulling debris into resonant patterns. Everywhere you look, the rings shimmer in slow motion, a frozen waterfall spread out across space. Historians still argue whether the rings are ancient, forming with Saturn itself, or shockingly young, perhaps only 100 million years old, born when a moon wandered too close and was torn apart. That's the heart of Saturn's secret. The rings may not be ornaments, but tombstones. A moon or even a comet might have been shredded by Saturn's immense tidal forces. The rubble spread and flattened into a disk, glowing now like an eternal memorial. You can almost imagine the fragments whispering together as they circle, a choir of ice singing of the world they used to be. Saturn's own bulk turns slowly beneath the rings. It's a gas giant like Jupiter, striped faintly with bands, though softer, paler, almost more reserved. The planet spins so quickly that it bulges at the equator, squashed into a subtle oblong shape. You can see shadows of storms swirling on its cloud tops, but the drama here belongs above, not below. The sleepy cadence pulls you along the rings themselves. You hover just above, watching sunlight scatter like diamonds across ice chunks. They orbit silently, no clinking, no crashes, just the faint ballet of objects obeying gravity's quiet choreography. If you scooped some up, they'd look like handfuls of crushed snow, sharp-edged and dazzling. But don't get too comfortable. Those bits race at tens of thousands of kilometers per hour. Touch one barehanded and you'd vanish into powder before you had time to say selfie. Historians still argue whether the rings will last. In fact, some estimates suggest they're fading, slowly raining down onto Saturn itself in a process called ring rain. One day, perhaps in a few 100 million years, Saturn may be bare, its signature ornament gone. For now, though, you catch them at their brightest, an ephemeral necklace glowing under starlight. You glance outward and see Saturn's moons, dozens of them. Titan looms largest, hazy and orange. Its atmosphere thicker than Earth's. Enceladus gleams icy white, jetting water plumes into space. Each moon feels alive with potential, but tonight they stand as silent guardians of the rings, reminders that destruction and beauty often walk hand in hand. And for a little playful thought, if Saturn were closer to Earth, visible with naked eyes as it truly is through telescopes, humans might never stop staring. Street lamps would be dimmed, poets would have written entire libraries just about its arcs, and probably some marketing firm would have tried to sell you Saturn ring engagement jewellery. Thankfully or sadly, Saturn stays distant, a private spectacle for anyone willing to look. You drift upward, taking in the full sweep of the ring system one last time. The view makes you drowsy. Endless arcs curving across the dark, perfectly circular, hypnotic in their repetition. Saturn doesn't shout its presence like Jupiter. It seduces, pulls you in gently, then holds you captive with its shimmering halo. And as you turn to leave, you notice Titan tugging at your gaze. That moon is no mere satellite. It's a world with seas, skies and weather. A place where rain falls not as water, but as liquid methane. You can already imagine the quiet lapping of alien waves. The rings fade behind you as Titan calls, promising shores stranger than any on Earth. Titan drifts into view, round and hazy, wrapped in an atmosphere the colour of burnt honey. Unlike most moons, bare, airless, and silent, Titan wears a thick orange cloak that hides its surface from easy view. As you descend, the haze thickens, muting the sun into a pale blur. It feels almost like flying through smog at sunset, though there's no city below, only alien seas waiting to glisten under the gloom. Titan is unique. It's the only moon in the solar system with a dense atmosphere, denser even than Earth's. You could walk here without a pressure suit, though you'd still need an oxygen tank and a winter coat. The temperature hovers at a bone-numbing 179 degrees Celsius. Your breath would freeze before it fogged your visor. But the air is thick enough to press against your skin, heavy with nitrogen and methane. Strangely, you could strap on wings and actually fly with a running start. Gravity is low, air resistance high. Imagine jogging into the haze and simply lifting off like some dream of childhood freedom turned real. A mainstream fact: Titan was first identified in 1655 by Dutch astronomer Christiaan Huygens, the same man who figured out Saturn's rings weren't ears, but an encircling disk. Huygens named it Titan, fitting, since it's larger than Mercury and second only to Ganymede among moons. For centuries it was just a speck, but in 2005, the Huygens probe, yes, named after him, landed on Titan's surface. It was the first time humanity touched down on a world in the outer solar system. The pictures showed pebbles rounded by erosion, a riverbed etched across frozen ground, and a hazy sky overhead. Here's the quirky tidbit: Titan has rain, not water but methane. Clouds gather and spill droplets that fall in slow motion through the dense atmosphere, splattering into seas of liquid hydrocarbons. If you stood on a Titan shoreline, raindrops would feel heavy, almost like glass beads, cool and sticky against your gloves. Lakes stretch across the surface, Kraken Mare, Ligeia Mare, vast enough to rival Earth's Great Lakes, only filled with methane and ethane instead of water. You hover over one of these alien seas now. The waves lap gently, stirred by winds you cannot hear. Imagine sitting on the shore, listening to the faint hiss of droplets, your reflection fractured on a liquid mirror so cold it might as well be glass. The air smells faintly of gasoline, sharp and acrid, though you're safe behind your visor. Titan feels strangely familiar. Clouds, rain, rivers, shorelines, and yet so alien that your mind keeps stumbling over the details. Historians still argue whether Titan could host a life, not life as we know it, no cozy water-based cells, but perhaps methane-loving organisms, chemistries unlike anything on Earth. In 2010, scientists reported strange imbalances in Titan's atmosphere, hydrogen mysteriously vanishing near the surface, acetylene disappearing faster than expected. Was it geological chemistry or something biological? The debate never quite settled. It lingers, hazy as Titan's skies. The sleepy rhythm of Titan settles into you. Everything here feels slowed, muted, as though time itself drags in the thick air. Droplets fall lazily. Waves crawl instead of crash. Even sunlight takes its time, reduced to a dim orange glow. It's like walking through a dream, where motion is syrupy and sounds are swallowed before they reach your ears. And then, for a playful note, picture a Titan travel brochure. Come visit the only moon with real beaches. Enjoy kayaking in liquid methane, protective suit required. Watch the sunset, well, more like an endless twilight, while sipping hot cocoa inside your climate-controlled dome. Tourists would probably demand marshmallows shaped like Saturn. You drift upward again, letting Titan's haze blur into distance. Behind you, Saturn's rings still gleam faintly, but ahead another giant waits. Uranus. Tilted on its side like a world that got drunk and never stood back up, its pale turquoise glow calls you forward, promising strangeness not of seas or storms, but of orientation itself. Titan fades into shadow, its methane rains falling quietly behind you, while Uranus tips over the horizon, a planet forever sideways. Uranus rolls into view like a turquoise marble, soft and pale against the black canvas of space. At first glance it looks calm, almost boring really. No screaming storms like Jupiter, no golden rings like Saturn, no rusty canyons like Mars. But you know better. Uranus isn't ordinary at all. This is the planet that decided up and down were overrated. Instead of spinning upright like the others, Uranus tilts nearly 98 degrees on its side, wobbling around the sun like a cosmic barrel rolling in slow motion. The mainstream fact, Uranus's tilt makes its seasons absurd. Each pole spends 42 years in daylight, followed by 42 years in darkness. Imagine living in a place where summer is longer than a human lifetime, and winter just as long. You'd grow up under a never-setting sun, then grow old under a never-ending night. Sleep schedules? Forget about it. Historians still argue what caused Uranus to topple. One theory suggests a collision with a massive body early in its history, a forgotten planet that sideswiped Uranus so hard it knocked it flat. Another idea imagines multiple smaller impacts adding up to a slow collapse. And some argue it may have formed sideways from the beginning, a planetary oddball from birth. Whatever the truth, Uranus spins like a drunken dancer, poles pointing sideways while rings and moons whirl in strange orientations. Speaking of rings, Uranus does have them, faint, dark, and often overlooked. Discovered in 1977, they circle the planet like thin black hoops, less flamboyant than Saturn's, but quietly elegant. You drift past them now, seeing pebbles and dust drifting in orbit, a minimalist version of the grand show Saturn staged. Here's the quirky tidbit. William Herschel, who discovered Uranus in 1781, originally wanted to name it Georgium Sidus, George's star, in honour of King George III. Imagine if schoolchildren today had to memorise Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, George, Neptune, and Pluto. Thankfully, the astronomical community had more taste, eventually settling on Uranus to match the Greco-Roman pantheon. Though, let's be honest, the name has provided middle schoolers with endless giggles ever since. The surface, or rather the cloud tops, glow with an icy cyanine light. Uranus is called an ice giant, its atmosphere rich in hydrogen, helium, and methane. The methane absorbs red light, giving the planet its blue-green hue. Beneath the clouds, things get stranger. A slushy mantle of water, ammonia, and methane, rushed under pressures that defy imagination. Scientists think Uranus may even have an exotic ocean of superionic water, a phase where water conducts electricity like metal. a sea of liquid lightning, hidden deep inside. The sleepy cadence wraps around you as you watch Uranus spin on its side. There's something oddly soothing about its sideways rotation. Every orbit feels like a gentle tumble, like watching a marble roll across a tabletop. The planet doesn't roar or rage. It drifts, slow and steady, in its peculiar rhythm. Historians still argue whether Uranus's interior holds a core at all, or whether its insides are just layers of ice and gas blending without a distinct centre. Juno taught us that Jupiter's fuzzy core blurred boundaries. Perhaps Uranus hides similar mysteries. And there's another debate. Why is Uranus so bland compared to Neptune? Its twin often flaunts dark storms, but Uranus wears a muted face. Is it colder? Calmer? Or is it just playing shy? For a playful aside, imagine living on one of Uranus's moons, like Miranda. This tiny world looks like a patchwork quilt, with cliffs taller than Everest stacked beside rolling plains. From there, Uranus would loom sideways in the sky, a turquoise ceiling so big it would stretch your neck just to take it in. And every 42 years, the sun would creep above the horizon and refuse to leave. Great for sunbathers, terrible for bedtime routines. You drift further outward, Uranus shrinking behind you, still rolling sideways in its eternal tumble. Ahead glimmers Neptune, deeper blue, stormier, a planet where winds whip faster than the speed of sound. If Uranus is the quiet sibling, Neptune is the restless one, forever stirring. And as Uranus fades into distance, you can't help but smile at its quiet rebellion. In a solar system that prefers upright dancers, Uranus spins sideways, unconcerned, an eternal reminder that sometimes the strangest path is the most graceful. Neptune sharpens into view like a sapphire lantern glowing at the edge of darkness. From this distance, the sun is barely more than a star, yet Neptune still shines in deep cobalt, defiant and restless. Where Uranus was muted and calm, Neptune is dramatic. Its winds are the fastest in the solar system, whipping across the atmosphere at more than 2,000 kilometers per hour, faster than the speed of sound on Earth. Imagine standing in a world where the weather itself could outrun a bullet. Of course, standing here is impossible. Neptune is all atmosphere, no surface, just a gradient of clouds giving way to crushing depths. The mainstream fact, Neptune was the first planet discovered not by direct observation, but by mathematics. In 1846, astronomers Urbain Le Verrier and John Couch Adams separately predicted its existence, noting that Uranus's orbit was wobbling in ways only a hidden planet could explain. Johann Galle in Berlin pointed his telescope where the calculation said, and there it was. Neptune was conjured into human knowledge by math before it was seen with eyes. Historians still argue over who deserves more credit, Le Verrier, Adams or Galle, but the discovery remains a triumph of pencil and paper astronomy. Here's the quirky tidbit. After it was found, some astronomers thought there might be yet another planet tugging at Neptune itself, a hypothetical Planet X. That search eventually led to the discovery of Pluto decades later, though Pluto turned out to be much too small to explain the supposed wobbles. Still, Neptune's existence sparked a treasure hunt that stretched human imagination well beyond what anyone expected in the 19th century. As you drift closer, Neptune's atmosphere comes alive. Clouds streak white against the deep blue, moving in patterns that hint at hidden layers. Voyager 2, the only spacecraft ever to visit Neptune, flew past in 1989 and snapped iconic photos of the Great Dark Spot, a storm the size of Earth. By the time the Hubble Space Telescope looked again years later, the spot had vanished, like a bruise that healed. But new dark spots have since appeared, suggesting Neptune's storms flare and fade quickly, as if the planet is constantly rolling dice to decide its mood. The sleepy rhythm here is different. Neptune feels less like a dancer or a king, and more like a restless dreamer, forever shifting in its sleep. You float above a cloudscape where no storm lasts, where winds howl invisibly, where the sky itself seems undecided. It's hypnotic to watch, white clouds forming, stretching and dissolving against the indigo backdrop. Deep inside Neptune, pressures grow intense enough to break apart methane molecules, releasing carbon atoms that may rain down as diamonds. Imagine entire thunderstorms of jewels pelting into the depths, sparkling briefly before vanishing into the dark mantle. Historians still argue whether this diamond rain is real or just an extravagant model, but the thought lingers. An entire world storming with gems, forever hidden from human eyes. its moon. Triton circles backward, orbiting Neptune in the opposite direction of the planet's rotation. This is a clue that Triton wasn't born here but captured, a wanderer pulled into Neptune's grip. Triton is icy, active, even spouting nitrogen geysers from its surface. But its orbit dooms it, slowly spiraling inward, destined to break apart one day. Perhaps it too will be shredded into rings, adding another ornament to Neptune's shifting face. You drift in the cold silence, watching Neptune turn slowly. Its blue glow is deeper than Uranus's, more vivid, as if the planet insists on being seen, even from billions of kilometers away. And for a playful aside, if you lived on Neptune, a single year would last 165 Earth years. You'd celebrate your first birthday around retirement age, and your second well after your great-grandchildren had grandchildren. Talk about slow cake delivery. Historians still argue why Neptune's winds are so violent. With so little sunlight this far out, where does the energy come from? Some suggest internal heat drives the gales. Others think mysterious atmospheric dynamics amplify small differences into raging storms. The answer remains elusive, just like the planet itself. The sleepy pull deepens as you leave Neptune behind. You can still see its swirling storms glowing faintly, but already something else tugs at your curiosity. Beyond Neptune, the line between planets and not planets blurs. Pluto waits in the shadows, its icy plains and heart-shaped scar reminding you that the universe doesn't care about human categories. Neptune fades, a restless sapphire turning in silence, while Pluto's small stubborn glow beckons from the edge of the known. Pluto greets you like a shy ember, faint against the dark but glowing with quiet dignity. For decades it was the 9th planet, the underdog that every schoolchild learned to recite at the end of the solar system's roll call. Then in 2006, the International Astronomical Union threw a cosmic curveball and reclassified it as a dwarf planet. Some astronomers cheered the clearer definitions, others grumbled. Schoolteachers sighed, textbooks panicked, and kids everywhere demanded to know why their favourite tiny planet got kicked off the list. The mainstream fact, Clyde Tombaugh discovered Pluto in 1930, painstakingly comparing photographic plates at Lowell Observatory in Arizona. His find fulfilled Percival Lowell's earlier predictions of a planet X, though ironically, Pluto turned out too small to cause the orbital wobbles Lowell expected. Still, it became the 9th planet, embraced as the symbol of discovery at the farthest frontier. Here's the quirky tidbit. After Pluto's demotion in 2006, a group of Illinois lawmakers, Tombaugh's home state, passed a resolution declaring Pluto would always be a planet in Illinois. That means if you stand in Chicago and look up, Pluto regains its crown, at least legally. Historians still argue whether the IAU's definition of planet is truly useful. Does size and orbital dominance matter most? Or should geologic activity and roundness carry more weight? The debate hasn't faded, even almost 2 decades later. You drift closer, and Pluto's true face unfolds. In 2015, NASA's New Horizons spacecraft flew by, the first visitor to this distant world, and the images stunned everyone. Far from a frozen, featureless ball, Pluto revealed mountains of ice as tall as the Rockies, plains of nitrogen, frost stretching for miles, and a massive heart-shaped feature, Tombaugh Regio, etched across its surface. It felt like Pluto had been saving its best side, ready for its close-up after 85 years of being a blurry smudge. You hover over Sputnik Planitia, part of that heart-shaped scar. The surface looks smooth, almost young, suggesting Pluto is still geologically active. Convection cells of nitrogen ice slowly churn, resurfacing the plains. On a world this small and cold, activity was unexpected. It means Pluto isn't a dead rock. It's alive, dynamic, with heat still flickering deep inside. The sleepy cadence draws you into the silence of its atmosphere. Thin, faint, mostly nitrogen, but enough to form hazy layers that glow softly when backlit by the sun. If you stood on Pluto, the sky would be twilight blue, the horizon dim with a halo of haze. The sun itself, though distant, would still shine as bright as a full moon back on Earth. Not bad for something nearly 6 billion kilometers away. Historians still argue whether Pluto should count as part of a double planet system with its largest moon, Charon. The two are nearly the same size, and instead of Charon orbiting Pluto, they both orbit a shared point in space between them. Imagine 2 dancers holding hands, circling one another rather than one leading. If they were larger, perhaps both would have been crowned planets, but scale as always tips the balance. Pluto's other moons, Styx, Nix, Kerberos, Hydra, are small, irregular, like fragments captured by its gravity. They orbit chaotically, wobbling unpredictably, as though even satellites here can't decide which way is up. And then comes the playful thought. Pluto's demotion might have been tragic for schoolroom posters, but for storytellers it only deepened the drama. Pluto became the rebel, the underdog, the planet that was. If the solar system were a family photo, Pluto would be the kid who stormed off, arms crossed, muttering, "You'll miss me when I'm gone." And sure enough, when New Horizons revealed its icy heart, the world fell in love all over again. The sleepy rhythm deepens as you drift away. Pluto glows faintly behind you, smaller than Earth's moon, but richer in character than anyone expected. Its demotion couldn't erase its importance. If anything, it ensured Pluto will always be remembered, not for its size, but for its stubborn refusal to fit into tidy categories. And ahead, another icy body waits. Larger than Pluto, darker, meaner in orbit. Eris, the troublemaker that tipped the scales, the discovery that forced Pluto's downfall. Eris lurks out there in the deep, darker and colder than Pluto, orbiting the Sun in an elongated path that stretches almost twice as far. Its discovery in 2005 caused more than ripples. It caused a planetary identity crisis. Eris is nearly the same size as Pluto, maybe even a little bigger. And when astronomer Mike Brown and his team announced it, the astronomical community faced an uncomfortable question. If Pluto is a planet, shouldn't Eris be one too? And if Eris isn't, what does that make Pluto? The mainstream fact. That very debate led directly to the 2006 redefinition of planet. Under the new rules, a planet must orbit the Sun, be massive enough to become spherical, and clear its neighbourhood of other objects. Pluto and Eris failed the last test. Overnight, the solar system went from 9 planets to 8. Pluto was dethroned, and Eris was labelled a dwarf plowet sharing the stage with Ceres and others. Some cheered the clarity, many mourned the loss. The wound still stings for people who grew up reciting 9 names in order. The quirky tidbit, Eris was nicknamed Xena during its discovery, after the warrior princess from 1990s TV. Its moon was even nicknamed Gabrielle. When the official name was decided, astronomers chose Eris, the Greek goddess of discord and strife. Fitting, since the discovery sparked one of the biggest arguments in modern astronomy. Historians still argue whether the IAU definition was the right move or a rushed compromise, but everyone agrees Eris lived up to her name. You drift closer to Eris now, though closer is relative. It remains a faint, distant world, its icy surface reflecting sunlight that takes 9 hours just to arrive. Its orbit is tilted and stretched, far beyond Neptune, far beyond Pluto. From here, the Sun is only a brilliant star in the dark, not a blazing disk. Eris glows faintly, frosted and aloof, as though it enjoys its role as cosmic troublemaker. Eris's single moon, Dysnomia, circles quietly beside it. Dysnomia means lawlessness, the daughter of Eris in mythology, a wink at how this discovery broke the rules and forced new ones to be written. Together, the pair feels as like a duo of rebels, orbiting far outside the comfortable order of the 8 official planets. The sleepy cadence settles in as you imagine standing here. The landscape would be utterly still, the airless silence pressing against you. The ground beneath your boots would crunch like glassy ice, frozen methane and nitrogen sparkling faintly. Above, the stars would blaze sharper than anywhere near Earth, unsoftened by atmosphere. The sun itself, tiny, sharp, would glow like a lantern at impossible distance. The cold here is absolute, colder than anything you've ever known. The kind of cold that freezes not just water but imagination. And yet, even here, there's warmth in the thought that Eris forced us to rethink what a planet is. Before Eris, the solar system was simple. 9 planets, end of story. After Eris, the universe got complicated. Suddenly we had categories. Dwarfs, scattered objects, trans-Neptunian families. Suddenly the solar system felt bigger, stranger, full of countless icy worlds that don't fit neatly into our boxes. Historians still argue whether the word planet should stretch again. Some propose hundreds of planets, including every round object orbiting the Sun. By that logic, Eris would be one of many, and Pluto would get its title back. Others insist the stricter 8 keep things tidy. The fight continues, papers published, conferences debated, as if the universe itself cares what we call its children. A playful aside, imagine Eris with a personality. If Pluto is the sentimental underdog, Eris is the smug cousin who shows up at family reunions with a grin, knowing she caused the last big fight. "You all wouldn't even be talking about me if I weren't fabulous," she says, sipping her metaphorical cocktail of nitrogen frost. You drift higher now, leaving Eris gleaming faintly behind. It remains in its far orbit, content with the chaos it caused. And as you glide into deeper darkness, another wanderer appears. Sedna, more distant still, tracing a lonely path that stretches into the unknown. Sedna emerges from the void like a wandering ember, faint and lonely, tracing an orbit so vast it defies comprehension. While Pluto and Eris hug the edges of the Kuiper Belt, Sedna strays far beyond, spending most of its time in exile. Its path around the sun stretches tens of thousands of years. You could live 100 lifetimes and Sedna would not even complete one circuit. The mainstream fact: Sedna was discovered in 2003 by Mike Brown and his team, the same group that later uncovered Eris. At the time, Sedna was the most distant object ever observed orbiting the Sun. Its path is elongated, swinging it from about St. AU at its closest, that's 6 times the distance between Earth and the Sun, to nearly 900 AU at its farthest. If you tried to draw its orbit on a classroom diagram of the solar system, you'd need a football field to fit it. Here's the quirky tidbit. Sedna was named after the Inuit goddess of the sea, a being who lived in the cold depths and controlled marine creatures. According to legend, she lost her fingers to her father's desperate grasp, and those fingers became the seals and whales. Naming this icy outcast after her feels eerily perfect. Sedna, the Cold Queen, ruling from a distance so extreme that sunlight is a rumour more than a reality. Historians still argue how Sedna got its bizarre orbit. Some believe it's a leftover from the Sun's birth cluster, tugged into place by a passing star billions of years ago. Others propose the influence of a hidden giant planet, Planet 9, lurking far beyond Neptune, shepherding Sedna and other distant objects into stretched, aligned paths. Still others suggest Sedna may be a captured object from another star system, a true alien world adopted into our solar family. Its orbit is a riddle, one we haven't solved yet. You glide closer, though even closer here feels like approximation. Sedna is tiny, about 1,000 kilometers across, smaller than Pluto, cloaked in a reddish surface. That rusty tint comes from tholins, complex organic molecules formed when sunlight interacts with the frozen methane. Its colour makes it look like a miniature Mars exiled into the deep. Imagine standing here if you could. The sun would be no brighter than a star, casting a weak, cold glow. The ground would crunch under your boots, frozen hydrocarbons cracking like brittle glass. Above, the constellations would blaze sharper than you've ever seen, undimmed by atmosphere, endless and overwhelming. There would be no sense of day or night, just a dim twilight stretching forever. The sleepy cadence sinks in as you consider the vastness. Sedna's orbit is a reminder that the solar system doesn't end neatly at Pluto. It stretches and stretches, populated by wanderers we've barely glimpsed. Sedna drifts in near-eternal solitude, so far from the inner worlds that Earth's warmth feels like ancient gossip. And here's a playful aside. If humans ever settled Sedna, birthdays would be awkward. 1 year takes over 11,000 Earth years to pass. You'd spend your entire civilization's history waiting for cake. Sedna settlers might have to invent new calendars, marking time not by orbits but by the slow creep of distant stars. Historians still argue whether Sedna should be considered part of the Oort cloud, the distant shell of icy objects that may surround the solar system. Some classify it as part of the inner Oort cloud. Others insist it's a bridge object between the Kuiper Belt and the true deep. The categories blur, reminding you again how human definitions falter at the universe's edges. You drift outward once more, Sedna shrinking behind you, swallowed by the dark. Ahead lies something stranger still. Not confirmed, not visible, but whispered in gravitational hints. Planet 9, the rumoured giant tugging on these distant exiles. Whether it exists or not, the idea pulls you forward, into speculation and mystery. Sedna fades into her long night, the goddess of cold seas retreating into silence, while you chase a planet that may or may not be waiting in the shadows. The space beyond Sedna is darker still, not just empty but suggestive, like a stage waiting for a hidden actor. You drift into the realm of rumour, mathematics, and whispers, the territory of Planet 9. Unlike the others, this planet hasn't been seen, only hinted at by the strange choreography of faraway orbits, yet the possibility lingers, heavy enough that many astronomers speak of it as if it were already there, cloaked in the black. The mainstream fact, in 2016, astronomers Konstantin Batygin and Mike Brown, yes, the Pluto killer again, proposed the existence of a massive planet, perhaps 10 times Earth's mass, lurking hundreds of AU from the Sun. They noticed that several distant objects, Sedna among them, had strangely aligned orbits clustered together, as if shepherded by a gravitational hand. A single hidden giant could explain the pattern. Here's the quirky tidbit. Before Planet 9 got its current name, some scientists informally called it Planet Ek, a nod to the century-old tradition of searching for mysterious planets beyond Neptune, but others, jokingly or wishfully, nicknamed it George or George, echoing William Herschel's disastrous attempt to name Uranus after King George III. Even now, if discovered, Planet 9 would likely get a mythological name, but the memes already insist it should just be called Pluto's Revenge. Historians still argue whether Planet 9 exists at all. The evidence is statistical, built from a small sample of faraway objects. Some say the clustering is real and compelling, others argue it might be coincidence or a result of biased observations. After all, telescopes can only survey certain sky regions more easily than others. Until a telescope actually spots Planet 9 shining faintly in the dark, its existence remains both tantalizing and uncertain. You hover in the imagined presence of this world. If it exists, it would orbit the Sun every 10,000 to 20,000 years, tracing a path so vast it makes Neptune's 165-year orbit look like a quick sprint. It would be a frozen giant, perhaps a miniature Neptune, cloaked in methane ice, glimmering faintly in a sunlight that takes days to reach. If you stood on its surface, assuming it has a solid one, you would see the Sun as no more than a bright star, and the constellations would barely shift across entire civilizations. The Ziebfeld cadence wraps you in speculation. Planet 9 is more than a world, it's an idea, a reminder that our map of the solar system is still incomplete. For centuries, people thought the known planets were the whole story. Then Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, Eris, Sedna all stretched the boundaries. Planet 9, if found, would stretch them again, proving that even now in the age of spacecraft and satellites, the cosmos still hides secrets in plain orbit. And here's a playful aside. Imagine if astronomers finally spot it, and instead of a massive icy giant, it turns out to be something bizarre like a captured rogue planet that wandered in, or a black hole the size of a grapefruit with the mass of 10 Earths. Yes, that's a real hypothesis, though fringe. Picture the headlines. Solar system has secret pet black hole. Historians still argue whether such an idea is wild brilliance or just cosmic daydreaming. The space around you feels heavier, charged with possibility. You can't see Planet 9, but you sense its absence like a missing piece in a puzzle. The orbits of distant objects curve as if bowing towards something unseen, some gravitational monarch ruling invisibly at the edge of the Sun's reach. Whether or not it exists, the very idea tugs at you, pulling you deeper into the night. Ahead you catch another whisper of strangeness, worlds that might not belong here at all. Captured rogues, planets born elsewhere, drifting across the galaxy until the Sun's pull snagged them. If Planet 9 is hypothetical royalty, then the next step is outlaw wanderers, stowaways slipping into the solar system unnoticed. You turn away from the imagined glow of Planet 9, the possible giant haunting the dark, and drift toward the thought of interstellar orphans hiding among familiar family. You drift further into the outer dark where speculation thickens into possibility. The solar system, vast as it already feels, may not be entirely homegrown. Out here, whispers rise about captured rogues, planets born around other stars, flung loose by gravitational scuffles, and adopted by our sun-like strays pulled into orbit. The idea feels almost too romantic, but astronomers can't quite rule it out. The mainstream fact, rogue planets really exist. In 2021, researchers announced evidence for hundreds of Jupiter-sized planets drifting through the Milky Way, unattached to any star. Some estimates say there could be more free-floating planets than stars in the galaxy. These wanderers are cosmic nomads, ejected from their birth systems by violent gravitational encounters. Historians still argue whether our solar system might have snagged one long ago, hiding it in a distant orbit we have yet to discover. Here's the quirky tidbit. Some of those rogue planets, though frozen on the surface, might still harbour internal heat, enough to keep subsurface oceans warm under icy shells. That means entire worlds could be wandering between stars, carrying seas, and perhaps even microbial passengers, eternal interstellar hitchhikers. Imagine life not tied to a sun at all, surviving in the black. If that doesn't make you blink slowly and wonder, nothing will. As you hover in this imagined scenario, you picture a rogue planet slipping past the sun billions of years ago. Maybe it passed too close and was pulled into orbit, settling in the outskirts where Sedna and her kin wander. Maybe its presence explains the odd clustering we've seen, the same hints we chalk up to Planet 9. Or maybe it only brushed past, leaving scars in orbital paths before vanishing again. The solar system might carry fingerprints of these encounters, invisible except in the mathematics of trajectories. The sleepy cadence deepens as you picture these lost wanderers. A rogue planet would be almost impossible to see. No reflected sunlight, only faint heat radiating into the void. To the naked eye, it would be indistinguishable from the blackness itself, like a predator hiding in plain sight. Yet the thought of it drifting silently nearby, massive and unseen, is both unsettling and oddly calming. Space is good at holding secrets. Historians still argue whether objects like Sedna and Eris are evidence of such captures. Did they form here, or were they tugged in from interstellar neighbourhoods during the sun's youth, when it shared a stellar nursery with thousands of siblings? If so, then part of our solar family isn't truly native. Some members might be adopted, their histories written under alien skies. For a playful aside, imagine humans settling a captured rogue planet one day. Colonists could boast, "We don't live on a solar system planet, we live on an import." Travel brochures might brag about authentic interstellar heritage, while kids roll their eyes, just wanting normal gravity and a Wi-Fi signal that doesn't take years to ping back to Earth. The silence of deep space around you grows thicker. It feels like you're floating not just between worlds, but between definitions. Planet, dwarf planet, rogue, captured, native. The labels blur just as they did with Pluto and Eris. Maybe the universe doesn't deal in categories at all. Maybe it just flings rocks and gas into orbits and lets humans argue over what to call them. As you drift onward, you sense the pull of another phantom, one not lurking in the outer dark, but once imagined much closer, hiding in plain sight near the sun itself. A world that astronomers swore they saw, drew and charted, only to vanish from history. The mythical planet Vulcan, the planet that wasn't, waits just ahead in your sleepy journey. You leave behind the possibility of rogues, cosmic orphans hiding among familiar kin, and turn toward the strangest trick of all, a phantom planet invented by human eyes and desires. You slip back inward now, away from the cold outskirts and into the furnace glare of the sun. For a moment it feels like déjà vu, as though you are about to return to Mercury. But tonight, the heat carries another secret, one dreamed into existence by 19th century astronomers. Vulcan, the phantom planet that never was. The mainstream fact: in the 1800s, Mercury's orbit puzzled astronomers. It didn't quite follow Newton's predictions, the perihelion, or point closest to the Sun, shifted in a way equations couldn't explain. Urbain Le Verrier, the same mathematician who had triumphantly predicted Neptune's existence, proposed that another planet must exist even closer to the Sun. He called it Vulcan. Soon observers reported sightings, tiny dark spots crossing the solar disk, little blips they swore were Vulcan making its way across the star. Le Verrier's reputation gave the idea weight. If he found Neptune by math, surely he had sniffed out another planet by the same method. Here's the quirky tidbit. One French physician claimed to have spotted Vulcan while watching a solar eclipse in 1859. Others announced transits, some even drew sketches. Newspapers gleefully published headlines about new worlds discovered, while armchair astronomers everywhere squinted at the sun through smoked glass, hoping to catch a glimpse. Vulcan became part of maps, atlases, even novels. For decades it was treated as a real but elusive member of the solar family. Historians still argue whether those sightings were mistakes, sunspots, instrumental flukes, wishful thinking, or something stranger, like passing asteroids near the sun's glare. Whatever the case, Vulcan refused to show up reliably. It dodged predictions, appeared in one telescope but not another, winked into existence and out again. The truth arrived in the early 20th century with Einstein. His theory of general relativity explained Mercury's orbital oddities perfectly. No hidden planet was needed. Space itself was curved by the sun's gravity, twisting Mercury's path. With that elegant math, Vulcan evaporated like a mirage. The phantom world was erased, not by a telescope but by a chalkboard. The sleepy cadence of this story hums like a lullaby for human imagination. Vulcan is a reminder of how much we want to fill the gaps. When numbers don't add up, we invent worlds. When orbits wobble, we conjure planets to steady them. Sometimes we're right, like Neptune, but sometimes we're chasing shadows. And yet Vulcan didn't vanish entirely. It lived on in science fiction. Writers borrowed the name for alien civilizations, most famously in the universe of pointy-eared logic lovers. In that sense, Vulcan is more alive in imagination than it ever was in reality, orbiting forever in the realm of myth. Picture it for a moment anyway. A scorched planet hugging the sun so tightly that days and nights blur into fire. Crags glowing under solar flares, the horizon a wall of blazing light. If Vulcan had existed, it would have been the hottest, harshest place in the solar system, a world of extremes fit for legends. Playfully, you imagine the awkwardness of those 19th century astronomers if they could see us now. Yes, about Vulcan, someone coughs at a scientific dinner. Turns out it never existed. And Leverrier, who had basked in Neptune's triumph, might raise a glass and mutter, "Well, 1 out of 2 isn't bad." You drift outward again, leaving behind the phantom orbit of a planet that never was. The sun blazes behind you, brilliant and unrelenting, and your path bends back outward toward the human side of planets. Not the real ones, but the imagined ones that linger in myths, astrology, and pop culture charts. Planets that shape fates in horoscopes. Planets drawn into tarot spreads. Planets remembered, not in science, but in stories. Vulcan fades into the same shadows it came from. Never real, but never truly gone. While the strange astrological leftovers of forgotten planets wait ahead. You drift now into a softer realm, not of telescopes or spacecraft, but of stories, charts, and whispered predictions. The forgotten planets don't only exist in ice and rock, they also linger in astrology, in myth, in cultural echoes that refuse to fade. Even when astronomers crossed names off their lists, poets, mystics, and pop culture kept them alive in constellations of imagination. Take Pluto, for example. Demoted in 2006, but in horoscopes it never lost rank. It still rules transformation, death, rebirth, and underworld themes. People born under Pluto's influence are said to have intensity, depth, and an attraction to hidden truths. Historians still argue whether astrology's persistence is a testament to human psychology, our need to find meaning in the heavens, or a relic of older traditions kept alive simply because we like the stories. Here's the mainstream fact. For centuries, astrology and astronomy weren't separate fields. The Babylonians, Egyptians, and Greeks all tracked planets not just to measure time, but to predict futures. Even Johannes Kepler, the mathematician who gave us planetary laws, cast horoscopes to pay the bills. Only in the modern era did the two disciplines diverge, one claiming the mantle of science, the other drifting into symbolic art. And here's the quirky tidbit. Some astrologers still include phantom or hypothetical planets in their charts. Vulcan, though disproven by Einstein, occasionally pops up in esoteric traditions as a higher octave of Mercury. Others use Lilith, the so-called Black Moon, not a real object at all, but a calculated point in the moon's orbit, treated as if it were an unseen planet influencing emotions. In astrology, a planet doesn't have to exist physically to exert its pull. You let the sleepy cadence draw you deeper. Imagine lying beneath the stars in ancient Mesopotamia, when Venus rising before dawn was the morning star, a goddess announcing herself in fire. Mars was the warrior, red with blood. Jupiter, king of the heavens. Saturn, the reaper of time. People told themselves stories to match the lights above, and those stories shaped empires, rituals, even love letters scratched into clay. In pop culture, forgotten planets resurface as well. Science fiction novels filled the asteroid belt with Martian-style civilizations, as if each rock were a tiny world. Comic books gave us Krypton, the doomed planet. Television gave Vulcan a second life, this time as the birthplace of logical minds. Even astrology apps on your phone still ping you about Mercury retrograde. as though the smallest planet has nothing better to do than scramble your Wi-Fi and delay your emails. Historians still argue whether we should take these mythic echoes seriously or just enjoy them as curiosities. But they linger because planets are symbols as much as spheres. They're mirrors we hold up to ourselves. Jupiter becomes optimism, Saturn becomes discipline, Neptune becomes dreams. Even the exiled Pluto rules transformation, a reminder that no demotion can erase its mythic weight. And for a playful aside, imagine a future where astronomers finally confirm Planet 9, and astrologers scramble to assign it personality traits. Planet 9 rules the subconscious dread you feel when you forget your password, one might claim. It governs mystery, exile, and the art of ghosting your group chat. This past is any guide, discovery will always be followed by story. You drift slowly outward, the constellations above shimmering not just as stars but as characters. The forgotten planets are never truly lost, because humans keep rewriting them into myth. And yet, beyond myth and memory, real ghosts of worlds still linger. Scars in the solar system where planets might once have been, places where destruction left lasting marks. Ahead lies that solar graveyard, carved into orbits, craters, and tilted spins, where vanished worlds whisper through their ruins. You leave behind the human side of forgotten planets, the charts, the stories, the cosmic horoscopes, and drift once again into silence where physics, not poetry, records what has been lost. The space ahead grows heavy with echoes, as if you're entering a graveyard without tombstones. This is the solar graveyard, the place not of intact planets but of absences. You can't see them directly, but their ghosts are etched everywhere, in craters, in tilts, in gaps where something once might have circled the sun but doesn't anymore. The forgotten planets aren't always icy wanderers or debated definitions. Some may be gone entirely, erased by collisions, consumed by giants, or ejected into the dark. The mainstream fact: the early solar system was violent. Planets didn't form neatly one after another, but by smashing together in a cosmic demolition derby. Models suggest dozens of planetary embryos once orbited the Sun, ranging from moon-sized to Mars-sized. Most didn't survive. Some merged to become Earth and Venus, some were swallowed by Jupiter or Saturn, some were flung into exile, never to return. The solar system we see today is the quiet aftermath of billions of years of chaos. Here's the quirky tidbit. Scientists have proposed that Earth still carries the core of one of those lost planets inside it. That's Theia, the hypothetical world that struck Earth 4.5 billion years ago, producing the Moon. Fragments of Theia might still lie buried in Earth's mantle, relics of a world that no longer exists, absorbed into our own. If true, you are, in a sense, walking on the bones of a vanished planet every time you step outside. Historians still argue whether the asteroid belt is a graveyard or just a failed nursery. Was there ever a planet there, or torn apart by Jupiter's gravity or destroyed by an ancient collision? Or was it always rubble, prevented from ever coalescing by the giant's interference? The debate lingers, a tug of war between destruction and prevention. You drift past Mars again in your mind's eye, remembering its lopsided shape. Mars is smaller than it should be compared to Earth and Venus, as though something disrupted its growth. Some models suggest another planet once orbited near Mars, later consumed or ejected, leaving Mars stunted. Its small size might itself be a scar of cosmic subtraction. And then there are the tilts. Uranus lying sideways, Venus spinning backwards. Both are evidence of catastrophic impacts. Planets don't just tilt for fun, they were shoved, slammed, tipped into new orientations by ancient collisions. Every awkward rotation is a gravestone, a reminder that another world once rammed past. The sleepy cadence wraps you in the thought that absence itself can be a presence. The moon's existence whispers of Theia. Mercury's oversized iron core hints it was stripped by a giant collision. The sun's outer atmosphere may still contain traces of devoured planets, their elements mixed into its fiery breath. Even Earth's oceans may have been poured here by icy bodies that died delivering them. Everywhere you look, survivors carry scars of those who didn't make it. And for a playful aside, imagine if the solar graveyard were literal, with ghost planets wandering invisibly like cosmic apparitions. Astronomers would sit in their observatories with spirit boards instead of telescopes. Is there anyone out there? Knock once if you're Phaeton, twice if you're Theia. Perhaps the asteroid belt would rattle faintly in reply, a seance of shattered stone. Historians still argue how many worlds were lost. Some models suggest a fifth giant planet once orbited between Saturn and Uranus, later ejected into interstellar space by gravitational shoving. If true, our solar system used to have not 8 or 9 planets, but 10 or more. Some of those survivors are now orphans, drifting unseen through the galaxy, while their siblings carry on in tight, stable orbits, pretending the family was never bigger. The silence deepens as you glide past this invisible cemetery. The stars beyond shine brightly, Ahoshi. Indifferent, but within the sun's grasp, absence hums louder than presence. Forgotten planets are not just icy dwarfs or mythic guesses. They are the bones of creation, the shattered, swallowed, or scattered children of the solar system's violent youth. Ahead lies the last frontier, not of collisions, but of infinite distance. The Oort cloud, the eternal night beyond where uncounted worlds may wait unseen. Circling so far from the sun, they might as well belong to another star. It is there in that deep sleep of distance that your journey will finally drift to its close. The darkness deepens now, wider and quieter than anywhere else you've drifted. You've left behind the stormy giants, the icy dwarfs, the phantom Vulcan, even the silent scars of vanished worlds. Ahead lies the last border, the Oort cloud, a place not so much seen as imagined. It is the eternal night beyond, where the solar system fades into interstellar space and where uncounted forgotten planets may still slumber, waiting unseen. The mainstream fact: the Oort cloud is a theoretical shell of icy bodies surrounding the sun, stretching perhaps a light year outward. First proposed by Dutch astronomer Jan Oort in 1950, it explains where long-period comets come from, those icy visitors that sweep in once every few thousand years. They don't originate in the Kuiper belt near Pluto. They come from this distant reservoir, nudged inward by passing stars or galactic tides. Here's the quirky tidbit. If the Oort cloud exists, and most astronomers believe it does, it may contain trillions of objects, not just comets, but dwarf planet-sized worlds, entire bodies drifting in orbits so vast they circle the sun only once in tens of millions of years. Statistically, the solar system could be hiding hundreds of Pluto-sized cousins out here, each unseen, each glowing faintly in a sunlight too weak to notice. Some might even be larger than Mars. They could exist right now, nameless, uncharted, waiting for a telescope powerful enough to catch their whispers. Historians still argue whether the Oort cloud is truly spherical or more disc-shaped, whether it formed from fragments flung outward by Jupiter and Saturn, or whether it's full of stolen objects from other stars' nurseries. If true, that means part of our solar system's most distant shell might not be ours at all. Our cosmic border may be a galactic melting pot. The sleepy cadence here feels infinite. Imagine floating among these objects, faint icy spheres, thousands of kilometers apart, drifting in endless silence. The sun would be only the brightest star among many, its warmth gone, its gravity a faint tug. Out here, there is no sense of center, only distance upon distance. Time feels different too. A year is meaningless when orbits stretch across ages longer than civilizations. Playfully, you wonder what it would mean if humanity discovered a true planet out here, larger than Earth, wandering so far away that daylight is just a legend. Would we call it Planet 9, 10? Would schoolchildren one day memorize a new name at the end of the list, while the adults roll their eyes and say, "Didn't we already settle this?" Perhaps we'd name it after a god of sleep or silence, fitting for a world found in eternal night. The Oort cloud is not just the end of the solar system, it is the beginning of interstellar space. Beyond it, the gravity of other stars begins to compete, their comets blending with ours. Out here, you can almost hear the whisper of the galaxy itself, humming softly like a lullaby stretched across light years. And now the journey slows. You've drifted from Mercury's baked cliffs to Neptune's sapphire storms, from Pluto's icy heart to Eris's rebellious frost, from phantom Vulcan to the mythic echoes of astrology. Every planet remembered, forgotten, debated, or imagined has passed before you. The story has carried you outward, through collisions and scars, through whispers of giants and rogues, until finally you rest at the edge where maps fail. The sleepy wind down begins, stretching long, soft sentences like fading notes of a song. Out here in the Oort's silence, there is no hurry. The objects drift in their orbits as they always have, as they always will, beyond the span of human memory. Their pace is slower than thought, slower than dream. You imagine yourself floating in the hush, eyes half closed, watching faint pinpricks of light drift by. The stars above twinkle without urgency, like a ceiling lamp dimmed for bedtime. The forgotten planets are not truly lost. They live in craters and myths, in names scratched into telescopes, in arguments that never quite end, in hearts etched on Pluto's plains, in rings shimmering around Saturn, in tilted giants rolling sideways. They live too in the stories you've carried tonight, whispered in second person, drawing you through one world to the next. Now let the last fragments fade. The Oort cloud stretches into infinity, and beyond it lies the galaxy. And beyond that, more stars, more planets, more forgotten worlds. You cannot see them all, not tonight, but that's all right. They wait patiently, circling in silence as you close your eyes. The journey ends not with an answer, but with a hush. The solar system exhales, the forgotten planets rest. And so do you.